of course, the story that ruled them all this week. And no, it's not the beginning of Lord of the Rings, but it's Beats Electronics and the supposed deal that sees Beats being acquired by Apple. So it was big news this week. It came out on Thursday, about midnight. Actually, I was in a hotel at the Great Escape when I read the news, and then I started spreading it around like the good busybody that I am. And yeah, so we have heard essentially every single angle around the story ever since. There's been hundreds of articles written. Seems like everybody that has any connection to music or tech or hardware or anything like that has written a post about the Apple and Beats Music story. So definitely it's an interesting one, but I wanted to hear your opinion. And in case you haven't heard about it, Apple would be acquiring, according to the reports of the Financial Times, Beats Music and Beats Electronics for $3.2 billion. This seemed to be confirmed in a video uploaded by Dr. Dre over the weekend, where he seemed to sort of boast about the fact that this was happening, although no official statement has been made at this point by either company. So it's essentially still a fairly weighty rumor, but we're not sure this is happening still yet. And I wanted to tackle it from three different angles. So the hardware side, the service side with Beats Music, and then generally what it means for the brand Apple. So starting on the hardware side, Beats sells a massive amount of headphones, so this is not a stupid move on Apple's part. They do make a lot of money, but interesting to see whether Apple could apply Beats Music into their own technology and what they're developing for the headphone side of things and the wearable side of things. So Darren, do you think that there is something there that Apple could actually tap into the pre-designed range of headphones that Beats has already made, and without having to spend all the money on R&D, and actually integrate some of the tech elements that they developed for the wearable side of things into those headphones and make them even more appealing to the mainstream?
It's certainly possible, yeah. I find it a bit odd. I mean, there's a sort of degree to which, they're. I think it was on Malik? Somebody was writing about it and saying that they've outsourced the whole thing when they designed the Beats headphones. They were outsourced to a guy that used to work for Johnny Ive anyway. So it's quite funny that they're sort of now buying a company that's designed products by a man, who used to work under the chief designer at Apple. There's a sort of strange, circuitous thing about that. It's a bit puzzling, really, isn't it? I think it's probably the best way of summing this one up.
Absolutely.
It's a bit peculiar. I think Beats are sort of, in Beats world, they're known for amazing quality headphones and all that sort of thing. I think to everyone else, they seem to be, certainly among the more cynical members of the public, they're sort of known for being somewhat looks over, style over substance, I guess. Which isn't really Apple's thing, it has to be said. They're not really a kind of... They don't do that. They're very proud of their high quality on their products and, and all that sort of thing. So, I think the reason we're seeing so much speculation in general is just that people are probably a bit puzzled as to the move. I think often it's like, when Spotify buys Echo Nest, it's such a no-brainer that it doesn't really warrant any discussion. There's nothing to discuss. It's kind of plainly obvious why they'd buy that company. But when you're talking about this kind of move, I think most people are just a bit bewildered. Apple do design, clearly. They led the consumer market for high design products. So they don't, they could certainly do this themselves. So I don't know. I mean, I think I have to say, my gut feeling on the whole just seems to be that maybe this is more of like the world's most expensive kind of acquire, or however we term it. When that I think the money is as much for Dre and Iovine and co as it is for any other aspect of the business, because I don't think there's much else that Apple couldn't replicate themselves. A streaming service is not beyond this company, and neither is a headphones business. But so it's curious, it's puzzling.
Lucy, on the hardware side, do you think that there's something there in terms of integration? And do you think it makes sense for Apple to buy a company for this valuation that also has a business that makes money and is already has a cash flow behind it, right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, from that perspective, the hardware business kind of paying for the stream music service, you can see that that would kind of make sense for Apple. I think one of the interesting aspects that has been written about over the past few days is how this might this acquisition, assuming that it does go ahead, might transform the rest of the industry. Right. There was another good article on GigaOM saying that, we might get to a point where actually all of the big tech companies are going to own a streaming service, or all going to purchase one, and then, you know, pure play music subscription services won't actually be able to compete anymore. They won't exist anymore, and instead we'll be in a very different scenario where, you know, music services are being bundled with, you know, hardware, with Amazon Prime, with headphones, you know, with anything else under the sun, really. And the music subscription streaming setup that we know today actually isn't going to exist anymore. So I think that's actually one of the most interesting possible impacts of the whole purchase, assuming that it does go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, and it could be an interesting evolution of the digital music side of things. But at the same time, it kind of when we talk about the streaming service, which is Beats Music, it does make me wonder. You know, I've seen a couple of articles already that are stressing the fact that people that are interested in Beats should look elsewhere at this point, and should look at something like Spotify if they want a service that they are absolutely certain, crystal clear, that is going to be here in a year or 2 years' time. Whilst Beats Music now, it's a bit of a question mark, because if the acquisition goes ahead, we don't know what Apple's going to do with it. So, you know, Darren, do you think that Beats can fit within Apple as a streaming service, or does it make a lot more sense for Apple to just, you know, start from scratch? I mean, the other question mark is around licenses. We don't know whether Apple can actually continue operating the service under the licenses that Beats has struck with the labels, or whether those are going to have to be renegotiated as soon as the acquisition goes through. So lots of question marks here, and then I guess a bit of uncertainty for Beats Music consumers. Yeah,
I mean, I think the license thing, I've seen and heard kind of, you know, people calling that both ways, that the licenses are transferable and things like that. I mean, I think, to be honest, in my experience, the music business are not in the sort of, you know, they're not in the business of being vindictive around licensing, in that sense that, you know, they're not going to sit and go, what, you want to renew? Well, you can get lost, you know. They might just seek to get more money out of it. And, you know, certainly the years of iTunes playing hardball on stuff might come around to bite them on the backside. But I don't think it would be crazy. You know, the music industry is still not stupid. And, you know, and I think that's the easy thing to forget is, you know, it's kind of, as Lucy said, you know, there's a phenomenal power for these people to take a service like Beats and bundle it into iPhones and everything else, you know, that Apple makes, and suddenly you have a pretty strong proposition. But yeah, I mean, relative to Beats' model and where that leaves them, you know, would people rush to sign up? I don't really know. I mean, I still maintain the number one flaw in Beats' plan was that they just didn't have a free tier. You know, if you can sign up for Spotify and get it for free with ads, and same with audio, and maybe Deezer, I forget, to be honest, then, you know, in the face of that sort of 7 days free use, and then trying to chase people for a you know, a $10 or $15 subscription is just, you know, it doesn't add up, does it? People are just going to take one look and sort of say, well, you know, as everyone's constantly remarked, you know, these services are largely homogenous, bar a few discovery bits thrown in and stuff like that. But certainly to the degree where, you know, if it's $10 a month on Beats or nothing for Spotify, and you put up with some ads, then I would imagine a lot of people will plump for the former. But I mean, you know, I think something that others have remarked is that this is all just manna from heaven for Spotify. You know, it thrusts the whole streaming music debate right to the fore. You know, it drives a lot of people back their way because of people questioning whether Beats are the ones to go for. You know, it's a total gift. I mean, if I was Spotify, I'd just be running around doing high fives all the time now. So, yeah, I suspect, you know, we'll see. But I think around this, Spotify probably shouldn't get too comfortable, because, you know, again, going back to Lucy's point, I think we're still the question that's not been answered is the degree to which streaming services can just be tossed in with something else you're paying for. Whether that's an iPhone or something a little bit more straightforward, kind of like Amazon Prime, you know, where they're trying to bundle in video now. So originally we were all signing up because it meant free postage, whereas now it's sort of free postage and free video service. And, you know, if they bundle music into that as well, then that would be a pretty aggressive move to the man in the street. And, you know, I think every time I'm on here, I seem to repeat that mantra, but it's kind of like, you know, we in the music industry tend to look at ourselves and our terribly snobbish ways, when I think, you know, the other 95% of the population that you're trying to capture on this are probably more likely to go in for bundled services and things, because it's just very painless, and it reaches that point of sort of music as a as an amenity service in the same manner as electricity and stuff.
Yeah.